Well, after a number of failed attempts, I've decided to do it the old-fashioned way and just do a simple YouTube video made on my cell phone, which is a total situational irony because, of course, that's about technology and its effects. You would imagine would not have any technological snafus, but of course, so far in the semester, we've had more than our fair share. One quick note is that the movie Ivory Tower, students had been emailing me saying that we didn't have access to the site and that the site was shut down because of illegal downloads. Well, that's another technological glitch, and it turns out that the new umbrella surveillance technology that was purchased for the entire UW system has been shutting down lots of sites that have got no problems with illegal download. And this site, which it was Documentary Mania, doesn't have any problems. And the film is a great one. So it's back up and running. The particular URL has been whitelisted. And if you guys encounter any other times you try to use the internet stout and you get that same message, make sure you click on that little link that says, please report this if you find that this has been made in error, because the system is making tons of errors. And this is really kind of a limitation of our freedom of speech on campus, so we got to make sure we stay on top of it. So the tech guys have fixed it. We have access to the film, and the library as a backup has now got access to the film streaming through the library, so I'm going to give you that link as well. So let's see, the first technological snafu is now corrected because now we're making our videos vis-a-vis Facebook instead of Kaltura on the Canvas site. And now we have access to the film, which actually suits the purposes of our class really well. So I'm excited we got that up and running. I'll be giving you these like weekly little video casts to try and give you a sense of like who I am. This is like my house. It's part of like how I want to try to personalize a little bit of this class, because I'm not really an online instructor. It's not my idea of you know, how I am best suited towards teaching, but I think we can still make it work. I've emailed all of you to check up how you're doing and make sure you guys have access to the course materials, and also to make sure you're adjusting all right to life on campus, because this is going to be a semester unlike any other. So if you need anything from me, or you need any connections to any services, or you're feeling any types of anxiety, please don't hesitate to reach out, because we want to make sure that you guys are all feeling a sense of security here, to make sure that we've got that, you know, that we've got you covered as best we can. So one thing I would like to start doing in the class that seems like a good idea is to do weekly discussions. And most people so far have saying that even though the online format permitted them the ability to take other classes, they still have that slot free on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And a lot of folks are saying that Thursday works well, so we'll probably be doing weekly discussions on the materials from 10 to like 11. And you can stay for as long as you want. You can drop in whenever you're able to make it. The more the merrier. But I think, especially given the type of content that we're going to be discussing and be engaging with, I really feel like this personal interaction is going to be super helpful. And even though the tech discussions can be a little bit, you know, alienating, once we get our rapport, I think it's going to work out really well. So they worked out well last semester, and hopefully I think we can do that again this semester. So a little bit about the class. This is a history of ideas in the 20th century. And what we're approaching is a way of thinking about the intersection of two fundamental aspects of the 20th and 21st century. And that's this intersection of like ideas, like enduring ideas about the human condition that, you know, civilization has been producing for, you know, 3,000 years, 4,000 years, if we go back to the Sumerians. Essential aspects about what it means to be alive in the world. And the best aspects of what this kind of humanity is all about, which largely revolves around, you know, three fundamentals that I like to think about And that mean a lot to me in terms of how I teach and what I think that students should be, if not their primary focus, at least the focus that makes sense of what they're studying, especially in higher ed. So I like to think about happiness. I like to think about the ideas of like liberty, and then community, which are the essential building blocks of how we think about like this development of this kind of human civilization. I mean, this happens globally, not just in like a Western tradition, but these are the building blocks, the way in which we see that humanity has built its civilizing forces. And we want to think about that, one aspect of this enduring quality of what it means to be a human being. Now that's intersecting with these kind of elements of technology, which have never been part of the human story before. There's been a process of a technologization, a sort of mechanization, and a development of the ways in which these reproducible aspects of modern and postmodern culture have really, they've advanced a lot of aspects of our quality of life. But when we think about their effects on the ideas of liberty, happiness, and community, we're starting to understand that technology, mechanization, and this kind of reproducibility of the modern and postmodern world are really breaking us apart and disconnecting us from a fundamental commitment to happiness. Now we're seeing a kind of understanding of what the good life is, not in terms of enduring questions, but really in terms of conveniences. And that has affected fundamentally not only aspects of like our humanity, but especially ways in which we think about fundamental transformations and what this idea of this American dream is all about. For whatever we think about how the American dream has realized itself for people in the margins, it always had the promise of delivering that. And what it delivered was something that was not connected to like daily conveniences, but was connected to the higher ideals, even insofar as that Americans themselves couldn't deliver the promise of those ideals. So we're going to look at the tension that now exists between this push towards modernization and this effects that it has, on the other hand, for these kind of aspects of our humanity. And what we're going to be looking for in ways in which that we can use ideas as vehicles for rethinking how we kind of interface with technology, to make sure that it's allowing us to realize our kind of human potential, rather than like a sort of ease of use. So when we think about, the effects of this growth of technology and mechanization in the 20th century, we have to think that it produced one sort of fundamental movement or force that is directly affecting in a negative way our ideas of happiness, our ideas of liberty, and our ideas of community. And that's fascism. And fascism, it never existed anywhere in the world before the 20th century. And it's a process of these forces of technologization, mechanization, and corporatization that create a movement towards not producing fascist states or fascist rulers, though it has done that, but it's created creeping fascisms, plural fascisms, within our daily practice that have displaced the ways in which that we have connected in the world, or that continuity of our kind of autonomy that is geared towards those ideas that are collectively embodied in our kind of cultural identity, as Americans. So thinking about this creeping fascism and how it's enabled itself is going to be a really powerful narrative, and connecting that directly to this kind of technological transformation of how and why we exchange ideas, and how these kind of technologically produced images and sounds and ideologically constructed, practices have crept into our daily life. That's going to be one kind of fundamental way in which we're going to use the course to try and retake or rehumanize ourselves in the face of these creeping fascisms or elements of these fascist identities. Now, the documentaries this week get at three primary elements of these creeping fascisms. One, it wants to think about techno-fascism. Two, it wants to think about corporate fascism. And three, it wants us to think about ideological fascisms. So with the techno-fascisms, these are kind of creeping elements of the way in which that a fear that is kind of pervasive among Americans of our ability to do it ourselves, without the aid of a kind of technological prop, either to voice something or to represent something. There's a dependency that's been created that's part of this techno-fascism. Similarly, there's a creeping corporate fascism where there's an increasingly corporatized landscape that's also driven by another fear. And this is a fear of our own ingenuity to be able to do it ourselves. Much easier to allow the corporate mechanisms to do the thinking for us. And then a related aspect is this ideological fascism where we see these reproducible ideas that are made in memes and sound bites. These talking points that seem to be reified and replayed in a saturated framework. It comes from our cell phones, it comes from our laptops, and it inundates us with repetitive, reproduced ideas that aren't our own. And it is also creating a dependency, a fear of our own free thinking to be able to express, what's important about the world we live in. We depend on the way in which that things are shared on Facebook, or the way in which ideas are expressed by somebody else. And we like that, and we say, okay, that's good enough for us. And that's convenient. But that has a fundamental effect, on our individual happiness. It certainly has an effect on our individual sense of our liberty. And is definitely breaking apart the way in which an embodied presence of ourselves in the world is the heart of what makes a community. So, and Hypernormalization, which is like, oh my God, this is the great film that gets at exactly the ways in which these three creeping fascisms have been embedded in the way in which like a modern and postmodern worldview has been created. That has produced a remarkably similar way in which people see the world and their roles in it according to a commodified or reproducible or accessible image of themselves in the world. And when we look at what's going on with Ivory Tower, this is a great film, especially for us when we think about the role of higher ed right now, especially in the midst of a pandemic. What is it serving? How is it serving? And then what are the means by which these decisions have been made by these universities? And are these decisions made for students? Is it made for students' happiness? The production of student liberty? Well, right there at the moment of like high rhetoric, my kid was calling for me to go pick him up. So the point of all this is to use these two documentaries as a setup for us to think a little more deeply about the ways in which that these forces have been systemically embedded in especially our lives at Stout. And it's not to say that like Stout is run by fascists and it's trying to indoctrinate you with fascist ideology, but these three fascism forms of fascism, techno-fascism, corporate fascism, and ideological fascism, they're still here. And that's what we like to pay particular attention to, because it's not that they're intentionally here, it's that these are forces that are deeply embedded in like American society right now. Same thing with racism. When we talk about systemic racism, it's not because racists are intentionally embedding this in the way in which power operates. It's that these things aren't even seen anymore. And we aren't even aware of the ways in which they manifest themselves. They become procedural. They become embedded in the institution itself. So when we are going into the class, I just want you to keep an open mind and especially turn it inward and try to understand the ways in which that some of these elements of modern society have they've been hardwired into our expectations, and we no longer are necessarily aware of their negative consequences. And so what we want to do is to try and like open up our eyes to the ways in which that these kind of power dynamics are making influencing and making choices for us about things that perhaps we didn't realize were happening or manifesting themselves in ways that we weren't necessarily aware of. And that's what a course in the history of ideas is all about. It's about getting back to like essential questions about the human condition. And are we able to achieve that, and what's impeding those? And unless we're making regular reflections on the way in which that we are, striving or achieving or maintaining happiness as a goal, or liberty as a goal, or community as a goal, it's more than likely that something else is structuring those things for us. And that's what we're going to be opening up at the beginning of the class. Now, as the course rolls along, it's not going to be about fascism. It's going to be about like anti-fascism and about taking autonomy in terms of the way in which that you take responsibility. And more than just responsibility, it's that you're taking control of what you're learning and how, and why you're making choices that are intentionally building towards some aspects of your intellectual development that are going to make you super happy. Because it's not necessarily about making your life easier. In fact, a lot of happiness is about like enduring a type of struggle that you kind of overcome. That's the nature of the epics that have informed approaches to thinking about what the good life is, for thousands of years. Well, those epics have been displaced. That struggle's been displaced. By now, a pervasive sense of technology that can free us from a lot of those struggles that had a lot of really good effects. So we'll think about what's lost, and we'll also think about what can be gained by applying some really older or indigenous approaches to thinking about happiness to kind of restore or be the corrective to the kryptonite that sometimes technological dependency can create. So I'm super excited about this class. It's going to be a change of direction from other iterations of History of Ideas, but it's making me feel like this is the right class for right now. And I'm really happy that we're able to sort of exchange these ideas in this place, in this way, and to try and make this class as a means by which we can try to humanize our relationship and our interrelationships, vis-a-vis technology. So anyway, I'm Chris Freeman. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I hope you enjoyed the films this weekend. I found them super eye-opening, and hopefully you will too. I think it's going to be a spark for some great discussion, and I'm excited to have those next Thursday. So next Thursday, be looking for a link. We'll do a discussion, whole class, from 10 to 11. We'll see how that goes. All right, take care, good luck, and I hope your first weeks of school at Stout are going to be super rewarding for you. All right, cheers.